This is the Big Talk, another episode with two gentlemen today on the show. Richard Mahomba, the political analyst, and Honorable Member of Parliament, Mr. Agent Gumbo. Gentlemen, I want to welcome you to the Big Talk.
Pleasure being here.
Today we want to dissect or discuss on the reborn of factionalism in ZANU PF and the possible return to the 2017 scenario, albeit or vis-a-vis the collapse or the death of the opposition politics in the country. I will give Mr. Mahomba an opportunity to share what you think about the return or the possible return of ZANU PF factionalism to the 2017 scenario, where we ended up seeing the then President Robert Mugabe leaving office or being assisted to leave office.
So the starting point is that it is incorrect to say there is factionalism in ZANU PF, given that there is a tapestry of lessons from history where one can actually pick to say what is it that characterized factionalism in the past, and can we draw lessons in terms of what is happening now. So the first point is that what we as clearly or historically defined as factionalism took very explicit terms where a particular political camp within the party would say these are gamma talks, these are what, and we don't see that. And the last phase of that was a situation whereby we had the Professor Jonathan Moyo in 2017, where he actually categorized the dichotomies of power in ZANU PF as that of successionists and loyalists, and at the time, those he referred to as the successionists were the grouping that emerged triumphantly, culminating in the civil military transition that Zimbabwe got to benefit out of the challenges that were brewing as a result of the inadequacies of the First Republic. So you can, if you go back to the past, long and short, you can characterize existing camps then. But as it stands, there is no explicit camp that exists and is waging a war with another camp in ZANU PF. The party is united, it is alive. Yes, of course, you've got certain sections in the ruling party where you've got comrades that are interested in a particular continuity proposition in terms of the presidium, but that should not be treated as the apex of factionalism. It is a leadership continuity debate which should not, I think, be magnified to the reality of a factional situation.
A couple of questions for you, Mr. Mahomba, but I will give Mr. Gumbo an opportunity maybe to also share his opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Well, I don't know whether my opening remarks should derive from the submissions by my fellow colleague.
You're welcome to respond as well.
Or my opening remarks should touch on the proposition that there is a collapse of the opposition in Zimbabwe. I am more persuaded to deal with that or with the latter proposition and make a submission that there is a very wrong philosophy that we have developed, which centers on institutionalizing the opposition or institutionalizing the alternative voice in the country. And this is the exact reason why for many years we have failed to properly wage an emphatic opposition to the ruling party and to the ruling ZANU PF, because we have sought to, compartmentalize what opposition should be in the country. The real fact is that the real opposition must be considered in light of the contradictions which exist between what the government of the day is doing in terms of its policy propositions and policy implementations, and what the people of Zimbabwe and what the citizens really expect. Real opposition comes from that old lady who is in Chandambuya, who is failing to access implements, to embark on her small subsistence farming endeavors. The real opposition is in that young mother who is failing to access basic health care, basic maternal care, and basic medication within their local clinics down there in Dotito or in Mberengwa. That's the real opposition. The real opposition are the people of Zimbabwe who hope for a country where there is equal access to resources, who hope for a country where there is no elite there is no elite accumulation of wealth by a few, a selected few who might have connections in the country to the political elites or to those that are in the corridors of power. The real opposition are the students who are in universities and wish that their government would subsidize their education in order to allow equal access. The real opposition are the people who hope for a pro-poor budget that is implemented by the government of the day, which ensures that basic resources reach the common man and the common citizen in the country, and not celebrate in small and menial successes which do not translate to bread on the table of the ordinary person. That's the real opposition. What we then see in terms of how this is organized is people who accede to the call to leadership, people who accede, because eventually that opposition must be galvanized and organized into some form of government. It must be organized and galvanized into some form of organized resistance against the government of the day, because eventually our constitution allows for one non-form of transition of power, which is an elective process. So what you then see are leaders who come together and say, let's form this institution. This institution must then coordinate all the various movements and all the various mobilized groups of society and go to what is called an election. So I don't think the opposition has collapsed in the country, because I've defined to you where the opposition is. What we perhaps see and what perhaps people then interpret and seek to qualify are what we call elite contradictions, which happen within organizations which have been formed to mobilize and galvanize the opposition. So those elite contradictions, are they there? Yes, they are there. Some of them are fueled, of course, by the retentionist endeavors or retentionist aspirations of the ruling party, which then say, okay, how best can we disorganize these organizations or disorganize these movements which have been created to galvanize the opposition in the country?
Mr. Gump, I hear what you are saying.
Yes.
I think, are you suggesting that the citizens are now opposing on their own without really having that institution that we can point to as the opposition? And I also want you to respond to the fragmentations of groups that you are seeing in the opposition. You know, this is for a fact. There's a Chavango group, there's Welsh Manyule group, there is also, which you don't subscribe to those groups for a fact, right? And so you are fragmented, and as such, I think it's a purely justified assertion to say you as the opposition, you are dead, you have collapsed.
You see, it's doing a disservice to the people of Zimbabwe, making assertions that seek to align the suffering masses of our country and those that are opposed to the government of the day, aligning them to a man like Sengezo Chabango. You know very well, quite recently at Pre-Cape Farm, you had this particular character stand up before, or in front of a crowd and some parliamentarians and some members of ZANU-PF, declaring openly that he was happy to have the government of the day continue with its work. He was happy to have Emmerson Mnangagwa continue with his presidency. So definitely you cannot then align that person as a leader of the opposition that I've just defined. I've defined to you that real opposition is about ensuring a government that is people-centered and a government that delivers for the people of Zimbabwe. So you don't qualify the role of certain individuals based on the tag that they put on themselves that they are opposition leaders. You qualify their role based on the propositions that they make for or against the government of the day. You qualify their role and position based on the propositions they make for purposes of the betterment of the livelihoods of Zimbabwe. So yes, you can say there are fragmentation, so on and so forth. And I've stated to you, Costa, that there are on one end, elite contradictions which are valid and which are natural in any organization that is going through growth. But then there are certain contradictions which are based on diametrically opposite or opposing policy propositions. So, for example, you'll have Sengezo Chavango on one end saying Emerson Dambuzo Mnangagwa and this government must continue in office. You cannot then say that same person is a leader of the opposition or leads a fragment of the opposition. It's not correct.
What we have right now is, because the ruling part, ZANU-PF,
Yes.
doing all what it wants to do.
Okay.
And I think a number of people is there talking on social media. You saw the attention that they gave to Blessed Kesa.
Yes.
For, so to say, revolting against the government and starting to calling for the president to leave office. I want you to respond to what Mr. Mohomba said, that there's nothing like factionalism in the party and that all is well, vis-a-vis your capacity as the opposition.
All right. First and foremost, we want to treat factionalism as an antithesis of progress and the antithesis of development within organization. Factionalism is a common phenomenon. It simply enunciates two different positions or opinions or ideas, but many times this can lead to positive outcomes. We've seen this in history. Now, coming to what we see in ZANU-PF at the present moment, of course, I'm not a member of ZANU-PF. I will not have quite much detail to comment on some intricacies, but what I can tell you as a reader of political science and as a student of history is that we are witnessing within ZANU-PF what you would call real elite contradictions within the leadership of the party, which contradictions will arise, and I propose, out of two different positions. One, you have a group of people within ZANU-PF who suffer from what I would call the paradox of success. Paradox of success in that sense that they feel that they have done so well and so good within the confines of their roles as the governing entities, so much that they require an extension of time in order to replicate or duplicate or even further the said successes. I say paradox of success because these if you listen to people who are proposing what is called the 2030 agenda within ZANU-PF, they make these propositions, these proposals based on: we have built beautiful airports. We have built the beautiful Trabablas interchange, the Mbudzi, what is commonly known as the Mbudzi roundabout. We have built beautiful roads. Look at the road that leads to Parliament. We have built a beautiful Parliament, so on and so forth. So these are successes which do not directly translate to food on the table of the suffering people of Zimbabwe. These are successes which do not directly affect the livelihoods of people who are down there in Dotito, who are the real electorate or to which the government must be giving eye. So you have those people who are celebrating beautiful roads, and yet we have starving children in the rural areas. Beautiful airports, and yet we have no medicines. We have no equipment in our local hospitals. So that's why I say it's a paradox of success, and the group is existent. Then you have another group within ZANU-PF, which feels, and I want to call this group the ones that feel excluded. Why? Because they can relate to the demands of the masses on the grassroots. This is why you realize that the key organ within ZANU-PF, or the key fraction within ZANU-PF, which is coming out and speaking loudly against the 2030ists, are the war veterans. Why, Costa? Because the war veterans are the grandmothers and grandfathers who are living to together with the people at the grassroots who are not feeling the trickling down effect of the said successes by government. So they come because they are organized within ZANU-PF. They come with the voice that comes from the grassroots, from the masses. That is where they come from. They are not at the echelons of government, or they are not in these air-conditioned offices. They're coming from a hut down there in the village. So they come when they congregate because they have the capacity and the right to sit at the ZANU-PF conversation table.
Yes. To respond. Ms. Morve, there was so much to respond to, including your denial that there is no factionalism at the moment. But I would also want you to characterize what we are seeing: a group of 4 veterans, senior war veterans, some who are actually even on the battlefield, are now coming out to say, no, we do not be associated with the corruption that is so rampant in government and even in the party. They are complaining about nepotism, tribalism. They are complaining about even the threat to extend. They're actually saying they want to tear the constitution. Those are advocating for the president to continue beyond his official term, which we know constitution should be ending by 2028. We've got so much to respond, including his submissions.
So you don't have a situation whereby when individuals use their freedom of expression and you confuse that as a sectoral view or as a view of a collective constituency. The person in concern who has already been expelled in ZANU-PF as a result of a collective decision of the party, by the way, which emphasizes that there is no factionalism because the decision was made at a party disciplinary process, is not anywhere near the leadership structure of the bona fide war veterans entity. So, if we are to say the war veterans are speaking as a collective, we should be seeing one Douglas Maia, because he is the one that derived the mandate from the conference of the party to lawfully speak on behalf of that constituency, and Maia has not done that. So if anyone else appears who is not Maia, raising concerns of the war veterans as a formation of ZANU-PF, that person will be acting illegally, because there is a formal person who derives that mandate from the Congress and the conference of the party. And I also want to go back to issues that Advocate Kumbo raises, to say the opposition is the suffering masses of our people. I think it's a compensatory lie, maybe a compensatory misrepresentation, as it were, of the failure for the opposition to effectively mobilize, to effectively institutionalize, and to effectively centralize its power. Because if you go to the statement that Nelson Chamisa made when he made his early retirement from politics, he was quite clear that there were these contradictions and he needed to restart, right? And if we are to take the argument that ZANU-PF is engineering these fragmentations in the opposition party, the opposition, using its support base, should actually prove its capacity to contradict the alleged state-sponsored fragmentations. So the fact that it is failing to stand against the state-organized fragmentation, it means at the level of political strategy, we have got an opposition that is weak in terms of developing strategies that content state-sponsored fragmentations. Yes, let's assume the state fragmentations are there. They've been identified, and we are approaching close to a year now without any immediate solutions. Yes, we should not argue that oversimplify the economic challenges of our people and say, well, because there are people who have got lack of access to medical facilities and all of that. Therefore, these people automatically belong to the opposition, and they epitomize the opposition. I think it's oversimplification of economic challenges and attaching economic challenges to using economic challenges as a force of oppositional legitimacy, as if there are no people who support ZANU-PF who go through the same suffering that the opposition now wants to appropriate as a symbol of its popularity. We cannot be a nation that celebrates the structural immiseration of our people as a means of defining the magnitude of our political influence. So it means that the opposition as a party in government should actually be deploying its energy to reduce poverty and not to use poverty as a benchmark of its success, because its mandate from the electorate is that of reducing poverty and not using poverty as a weapon of asserting its political influence. And that the growing poverty in the land translates to the magnitude of its support. They should organize, and they should actually be structured in their approach. And if genuinely the challenges they are facing are arising from ZANU-PF, let's see their genius in overriding ZANU-PF's political mischief.
What is your response, Mr. Kum?
Well, I think it's quite disingenuous to propose that the poverty that our people go through in this country and the economic troubles that our citizens go through is a natural phenomenon. It is not. It is as a result of a failed governing culture. It is as a result of a failed government. It is a result of policy inconsistencies and incoherencies. It is a result of the corruption which we witness every day, where you have just a few elites in this country enjoying millions and millions of dollars worth of lifestyles and enjoying privileges which are not naturally occurring to the rest of this country or the rest of the citizens of this country. So no, poverty and economic challenges are not natural. There's a result of a failed government. There's a result of ZANU-PF's resistance to change in this country. There's a result of the retentionist mindset, which ZANU-PF carries too much, that does not allow for democratic transition to happen in this country. We know very well, Mr. Mahomba is a student of political science, and he appreciates the concept of the role that liberation war movements played, which is significant, we don't take lightly, which is to bring forth the independence in of our African countries. But there is a certain inability that these movements have, and we've witnessed this over years. ZANU-PF has been in power and in control since 1980. And since 1980, Zimbabwe has gone through phases and waves of economic collapse, phases and waves of, incremental poverty within our communities. In fact, there has been debate sometimes around, social media and other spaces where people seem to now want to compare the economic fortunes of Zimbabwe prior to independence and post-independence. But this is owing to the resistance to the need to democratize in this country, the resistance for the need to change economic policy outlook of this country. We cannot, at this day and age, Costa, be run by a government which is still suffering from a hangover of the liberation struggle.
Do you dispute the question of your capacity to organize yourselves and resist whatever ZANU-PF continuously push to the people? And as he said, that you should not take poverty of the people or the difficulties as a raw material, perhaps to say this is what continue to
raw material.
Apply as the opposition.
Okay. All right. I had to laugh a bit with the word raw material.
Quite interesting.
Quite interesting.
I'll use it elsewhere.
Yeah. But nonetheless, I think it's ahistoric to qualify or describe the opposition movement as having failed to organize the masses and organize the citizens against ZANU-PF. Any person who's going to look into the history of the opposition movement will accept one very stubborn fact, that the gains that we have achieved against the authoritarian ZANU-PF regime have been incremental. If you are to look at from the days of the propositions towards a one-party state, where we really then introduced a fight for the democratic transition of this of our country, you come into the days of the labor movement, the rise of the labor movement, to wage a resistance against ZANU-PF and to start a conversation against the propositions by some who thought ZANU-PF needed to reform from within. You would appreciate that the gains that we have achieved over those years have been quite incremental. Up to the time that we had even the 2013 the constitutional referendum, and the subsequent constitutional changes within this country, which have allowed for the political space to open up. With ZANU-PF's resistance to change, there's been gains that have been achieved. You know, at one point, all we had was a ZANU-PF parliament with one or two other pliant opposing MPs, up to a place and time where at one point you actually had a majority within the parliament. We got to a place where we even had a government of national unity in this country, and everybody can witness what happened during the time of the government of national unity. So the politics there's been incremental gain in the work of the opposition, in the work of opposition leaders, work of the alternative in organizing the masses to wage a resistance against ZANU-PF. Liberation movements, by their nature, are authoritarian.
Very fine, Mr. Gumbo. Let's hear from Mr. Mahomba.
Okay.
You heard what he said. Your party and your government is purely responsible for the economic challenges that our country is facing, that our people are facing: poverty, shortage of medical bills, shortage of medical equipment, drugs, and so forth in hospitals. He's saying these are purely man-made, and you guys must carry the cross. It's purely your responsibility, and you are refusing to change for the betterment of our people.
So the starting point is that in terms of the overall architecture of our politics, we need to clearly unpack the historical and the contemporary role of the opposition. And in the process, one is reminded of the philosophical wisdom of Amilcar Cabral, who says we should tell no lies and claim no easy victories. My comrade refers to the first epoch of our opposition political environment, which fought the one-party state. That was the Zoom of the time, that was the ZAP of the time. So it's not a success that should be arrogated or, hijacked by today's opposition, because today's opposition in Zimbabwe is a byproduct of foreign policy interests of countries that were opposed to the land reform program and were actually centered around engineering the poverty of our people so that our people do not have access to the means of production, such that when the revolutionary process of the land reform took its course and regenerated to the current success that we are seeing as far as food security is concerned, we actually attacked the ego of imperialism. And this is the sin that we bear. And then now, when it comes to the issues of poverty, it is wrong for an opposition party that is crawling towards 3 decades of being in parliament in a country that will be 44 years very soon, next month. For an opposition that is fast approaching 3 decades of being in parliament, making the law, making the policies, to say that poverty is only a product of ZANU-PF's incompetencies, when this political party has been with ZANU-PF for close to 3 decades, out of the 45 years of ZANU-PF's existence. So if we are to be truthful outside the binaries of our political parties and loyalties, I think the opposition should also carry the cross of the economic challenges that Zimbabwe is facing. For an example, if you look at Harare, the maladministration of Harare, which is a subject of a commission of inquiry, is expressive of the desperate nature of the state to actually say this city has got excesses of corruption, to a point that the state had to find itself taking the most desperate route of having a commission of inquiry in 2025 around the issues of mismanagement. And we are saying, if we have got such gross and such inflated and such huge corruption at the level of a city, why should we entrust this party, which is a government in waiting with the state, yet it rips off an entire city and makes the city to actually collapse to the extent that we find ourselves having a commission of inquiry to actually take stock of the financial criminality that has been happening. Imagine you give such a political party the management of the state.
How do you exonerate the local government ministry from all that?
Well, the local government ministry over the years has exercised a separation of powers, and it is this separation of powers that has been abused to a point that an entire city is actually milked out, and you don't see that with a pro-ruling predominant local government authorities. You only see that with a municipal or a local government authority that is run by the MDC. You don't see that in Uzumba Maramba Pfungwa. You don't see that with rural district councils where ZANU-PF has a legitimate and corporate governance hold of those electoral jurisdictions. You see that at the center of the opposition's influence. You see that at the center of the opposition's popularity. And what that clearly means, it is a clear word that says we do not care about the majority that have gotten us into power, because it is in Harare where you see Harare and Bulawayo as citadels of the opposition is political popularity.
Mr. Gumbo, would you like to respond to?
Well, I think first of all, it's quite a betrayal of the people of Zimbabwe for a person who would speak on behalf of, or who would voice in support of the ruling ZANU-PF to seek to demean the real demands that we hear from the people of Zimbabwe, demands on issues of national progress, demands on issues of economic success, demands on issues of translating the wealth and resources of this country to the basic livelihoods of our people across the country. We can't localize the problems that we have. The city of Harare, the city of Bulawayo, the municipalities which Mr. Mahomva seeks to speak quite eloquently about, he forgets that they exist within the context of a central government. You made quite a good intervention, which is skirted around, which is an intervention around the role of the local government minister, and he speaks of separation of powers. Quite bizarre for him to make that proposition, because you know very well that there's no separation between local authorities and the central government and the Minister of Local Government, because our local authorities are run in terms of two pieces of legislation: the Rural and Urban, the Rural District Councils Act, and then the Urban Councils Act, which two pieces of legislation are the mandate of the Minister of local government to oversee, which also have given expansive powers to the local government minister in making interventions in the works of our local authorities. One very vivid example which he has given himself is the commissions which have been put to come in and do the investigations and so on and so forth. We know what the ZANU PF minister is trying to do with those actions. Unfortunately, the only commission which can interrogate the corruption of the Emerson Damzo Mnangagwa government, the only commission is the people. It's the people of this country. Is the only commission and the only evidence which demonstrates the incompetencies, the corruption, and the lack of basic love for the people of Zimbabwe is the Parenyato Hospital, where one goes in and will lack to find even a single paracetamol, a single painkiller in that hospital. Public service delivery is at its lowest in this country, while these people are celebrating airports and celebrating resurfacing of roads. So the people of Zimbabwe cannot be hoodwinked by sweet talk, cannot be hoodwinked by flowery language around the common problems that they face every day. We have a harrowing currency crisis in this country. We have.
Before you proceed, but
yes.
Are you really happy personally with the services of the city of Harare and the numerous reports of financial mismanagement, incompetence, incoherence,
land accumulation?
Okay. Let me get into that, Costa. In fact, we owe it to the people of Zimbabwe to be accountable as leaders and to accept sometimes where we acknowledge there's a problem. I'll tell you one thing. Do you know for a fact that the management of our local authorities, because of the way the law has been structured, the management of our local authorities is purely in the hands of people who are not employed by the policymakers. The policymakers, if you would, have a role that they play. They sit as council, they make decisions. But the town clerk is not employed by the councillors. The town clerk is employed through the local government board, which board is also appointed by the Minister of Local Government, which reports not to the councillors, but reports to the Minister of Local Government. We have had numerous examples, we can give you numerous examples of when our policymakers, our elected councillors, have sought to have certain individuals running certain offices at the management level in councils removed from office for embezzlement, for corruption, and for incompetence. And these people have been found to be served by who? The Minister of Local Government.
These are people are in 30,000.
And these are the same people that are earning 30,000. I did not hear any outcome of the commission processes. I know there's no outcome as yet, but there are certain information that has trickled into the public. I've not heard them to say there's a single councillor who's earning millions of dollars or thousands of dollars a month. I've not heard them to say that, but I've heard them to say that there is a town clerk who's earning over $30,000, who is employed through the local government board, which is a creature of appointment by the Minister of Local Government. So let's not lie to the people of Zimbabwe around these issues.
Gentlemen, we would want to wrap up this conversation.
Yes.
But Mr. Mohomba, I want you to respond. When you respond, then they will pose a question and say, in the circumstances, where are we heading as a country? The opposition and also the ZANU PF government and all the challenges that our people are facing. But first, I want you to respond to.
Yeah, we should be frank in terms of appreciating the administrative pitfalls that we go through. As policymakers, I think it's very important to acknowledge those pitfalls and deal with them. It is an anomaly that the privilege, the constitutional privilege, we find that the constitutional privilege of devolution is abused to an extent that Harare finds itself in a very severe leadership crisis as is currently. So it's true. I'm happy that we all agreeing that we have a crisis in Harare, and this crisis is a microcosm of the potential political crisis that Zimbabwe may endure under an opposition that is fixated on primitive accumulation, an opposition that is not so passionate about public service delivery, and the potholes, the poor sour sewer and poor reticulation systems are evident of that fact. So we are in that crisis, and at this point, the relative sample of that crisis is the capital city, which is predominantly which is controlled by the opposition. And if we are to speak of the country in comparative terms, compare the country with the human anatomy, we are saying Harare is the face of Zimbabwe. And this face of Zimbabwe is has been injured by the financial criminality of an opposition-led, leadership, an opposition-led council. But fast forward, what is it that we need to do?
Yeah, but maybe before that, Mr. Mopo, we know that we are struggling with our roads in Harare, and the question of roads not having been maintained, it's a story that we witness on a daily basis. But I also wanted to understand, would you still implicate the city of Harare in the, for example, the Bulawayo to Victoria Falls Road? You know, this has been trending on social media recently. What would you like to say? Would you still implicate the city of Harare there?
Well, it's a relative sample of work that needs to be taken care of versus the other work that you people choose, that certain sections of the media choose to ignore. You have seen maybe a threefold development in terms of the Beitbridge Road to South Africa and many other roads. So yes, So we must juxtapose that reality in the context of a work in progress, because we already have a template which was state-led. But you cannot say the same of Harare, which is supposed to be the face of the nation. And my emphasis on Harare as the face of the nation, it is because it is in Harare where all capital lands, where almost all your, it's the receiving port of all your investors who are interested in Zimbabwe. And you've got a city council leadership that does not grasp the strategic, bureaucratic symbol of Harare as the face of the state. And that is a problem. It actually means that if given other strategic assets of the country, it means that we will see this dilapidation being exported in every inch of our country, and it's wrong. We must not allow it.
In the circumstance, Mr. Gumbo,
Yes.
Where are we heading as a country?
Well, firstly, maybe we probably require a whole show to deal with the issues of local government and the role of local government in the entire development trajectory of this country. I'm a leader, and I don't believe in lies. I don't believe in lying to the people of Zimbabwe, particularly on issues that the people of Zimbabwe can go back to and read and find that, okay, here are the inadequacies, so on and so forth. I would say and insist that the problems that we have in this country emanate from an inconsistent governance culture. They emanate from a divisive governance culture. They emanate from a loose governance culture which allows for corruption and, to borrow his words, primitive accumulation of wealth by those who find themselves politically privileged and in positions and offices of power. You know, ZANU-PF government, I interact with ZANU-PF government as a lawmaker on a daily basis, and you can see the kwashiorkor of policy intelligence that they suffer from. You can tell that we are dealing with a government that does not realize that for this country to progress and to move forward, we require a collective effort. We require pro-poor policy propositions, and we require to go back and reconsider the fundamentals of economic development and economic growth in this country. You have a government which is, so fixated on the role that it played to liberate this country, which role is not opposed and which role has never been contradicted by anybody. We celebrate Tongogara, we celebrate Herbert Chitepo, we celebrate all the fathers who fought for the liberation of this country. But we are saying where we are now as a nation, what must be done to make sure that we modernize our economy, to make sure that we deliver basic service to the people out there in the country. We can't have an economy which is, if you may, bottleneck. You can't have an economy which does not understand that the base is the significant part to address and to deal with in order to grow an economy. We require to go back to our villages, we require to go back to our small communities and ensure that we empower our people down there. The poverty datum line in this country is so appalling. You can celebrate that, yeah, we have a beautiful road going to Harare. It's okay, we need the roads, but not at the expense of delivering basic health care to the people in the villages and the people in the communities. So as going forward, I will assert here and now, as I always do, that the only solution of growing Zimbabwe out of the doldrums of poverty and economic collapse that it is in, it is to remove ZANU-PF from power. This is not a problem that ZANU-PF has the capacity of addressing, has the capacity of dealing with, because ZANU-PF itself...
Who is going to remove it?
ZANU-PF has no capacity to deal with the problem that it created. We are the alternative, and we represent the alternative. We believe, I've said this before and I'll say it today, that we believe that we have in Nelson Chamisa a leader who will be able to unite Zimbabwe, but more so, a leader who will be able to lead an efficient government to recover Zimbabwe from what it is now and return it to being the jewel of Africa. We believe that in Nelson Chamisa we have a principle and an idea of a Zimbabwe that everyone hopes for, a Zimbabwe where everyone is happy, a Zimbabwe where everyone has equal access to the national cake, a Zimbabwe where our basic public amenities are functional, our banks, our financial institutions are functional, a Zimbabwe that creates confidence for people to come into it and partner with it for growth. That's what we believe, not ZANU-PF.
Mr. Mwamba, where are we heading as a country? We see in your party there is war of 2030, there is the war veterans, some are being chased out of the party for speaking their mind. Pretty much we don't see the prioritization of developmental aspects of our economy. Instead, the fixation is now on the politics of 2030 and so forth. Where are we heading as a country?
So to overly categorize the aspirations of ZANU-PF on the basis of a single resolution or out of many resolutions, more than 20 resolutions, is quite unfair. That resolution coexists with economic development based resolutions which emanate from economic focused thematic committees that constitute the members of the ZANU-PF conference. So I think that is just one most popular resolution, and it is a resolution that is perhaps being hyped on the basis of its politically exciting nature. It could be a resolution that is hyped because the game of politics is about the capture, the consolidation of power, and the crushing of opposition. And surely we should not look at ZANU-PF as this utopian entity.
You mean there was a resolution?
No. But I was just explaining the concept as articulated by Machiavelli. I didn't want to give an in-depth articulation of the source of my argument premise. But I'm saying the fundamental, or maybe to put it differently, the fundamental function of any political party is to capture power and be in power for the longest. And I think what is causing so much political excitement around resolution number 1 of ZANU-PF, it is a resolution that certain sections of the party think will keep ZANU-PF in power for a long time. And the function of political parties is to stay in power. This is why other political parties would want ZANU-PF out of power, so that they assume the power which ZANU-PF is actually fighting to consolidate. So we need to analyze that within the context of power retention. But most importantly, beyond power retention, I strongly feel that our political parties, all our political parties, must be anchored on the national question. And the national question is predicated on the national liberation, on the preservation of our national sovereignty, and the promotion of the national economy, or protecting the national economy. But it is obscene to the interests of the national question that you've got certain political parties which would think it's okay to primitively accumulate. It's wrong. Be it from ZANU-PF, be it from CCC, as we are seeing with the example of the hemorrhaging of Harare. Right? It is also wrong for a political party. It is also wrong for any political party to compromise the essence of national independence by virtue of perennially lobbying for foreign powers to intervene in issues of national interest by, fostering illegal sanctions, which epitomizes the continued bullying of the global south, which perpetuates the bullying of the global south, as we're even beginning to see across the Limpopo with South Africa beginning to experience what we have endured ever since the MDC was born, and it's a continued factional degeneration, which has maintained the number 1 agenda of hammering the economy through sanctions.
Your parting shots, Mr. Gumbo, to our viewers.
I'm tempted to get into what my brother has been saying, but nonetheless, we must provide leadership sometimes to the people of Zimbabwe. Leadership. Yeah. So my parting shots will be that we have a beautiful country. Zimbabwe is a beautiful nation with beautiful people and beautiful brains. What we do not have is a competent government, and we have a government that is, according to even what Mahompa says, hell-bent on the retentionist philosophy or mindset of politics. But we believe that change is now required in Zimbabwe. And the people of Zimbabwe ought to come together and address the need for change and the need for democratic transition in this country. That is the only way out of the economic trouble and problems that we are in now as a nation. So every person has a role to play. In our different communities, we ought to start mobilizing and organizing each other and understand that, yes, you will require some form of institution to get into the election. We will require some form of organization to get into the election. But it takes you and me to challenge the status quo. It takes you taking effort in your small community to challenge your leaders at that level so that we eventually get to a place where we can electorally remove ZANU-PF from office. Because without ZANU-PF in office, you and me have an opportunity to pursue our dreams to the fullest. Without ZANU-PF in office, every child in this country has an opportunity to access education, access health, and access clean water, something as simple as clean water, without trouble and without problems. We can't be hoodwinked by the beautiful languages and the flowery languages that people can speak out at rallies and the songs that can be sang about Emerson Mnangagwa. Go back to your house, look into your pantry, go back to your bank, look into your account, go back to your workplace and look into the conditions. That's what tells you whether the government of the day is doing well or is not doing well. Those are my parting shots.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mahomva, your parting shots.
Well, it's a sarcastic one, that the people elites don't have pantries, a majority of them. And you can actually see that is coming from an elitist predisposition. But anyway, that's a banter. I think we should be united beyond our partisan binaries. Appreciate that it is both the ruling and the opposition party that have been in parliament for all this time. The opposition for close to 30 years and the governing party for close to 45 years in a few days to come. So politicians like him should take ownership of the problems that the people of Zimbabwe find themselves in and be able to deploy their political energy to transform the lives of our people.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Martin Zgrameka, from the two gentlemen, you have been sharing with us what they think about the narrative that the opposition is dead, and also about the concerns and then the anxiety about the current the factionalism that we start to see emerging in ZANU-PF, whether it's going to degenerate in what we saw in 2017, where the then president, the late Robert Mugabe, may so rest in peace, was later assisted to then leave office. Thank you very much. Until next time, I'm signing out.